We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I've been very, very busy this past week, but Canada has a new prime minister. Well,
yes,
technically at this moment, prime minister designate, prime minister in waiting, because the official handover is not like fully complete, but there it is. New
How
prime
does that
minister
work?
without an
does somebody
election.
have to like vote them in or whatever?
So
I don't
it's
quite understand that.
So for folks who don't know, at the moment, the Liberal Party has a majority. Well, no. They don't have a majority, but they are the leading party. They are the party with the most seats in Canadian Parliament.
Okay.
They don't have an official coalition with the NDP, which is another political party up here. It's not an official coalition, but the NDP has been voting with the Liberals in order to keep them in power as a minority government, since nobody has more than 50% of the seats. None of the parties do.
We need that.
So in Canada, we don't vote directly for our prime minister. The prime minister is automatically the leader of the leading party in parliament. So that has been Justin Trudeau for the past 9 years. And he announced at the beginning of the year that he is stepping down. The Liberals were way, way, way behind in the polls. It certainly looked like the Conservative Party, which has been the official opposition, that they were going to have like a sweeping takeover of the government in our next election, which is scheduled for this coming October, but in a parliamentary system, if there's a vote of no confidence, that election can happen sooner than when it's scheduled. So everything was looking like it was going to go that way, but Justin Trudeau announced that he was going to resign as prime minister, so that means the Liberal Party elects a new leader. So it's registered Liberal voters. They get to vote on who the new leader of the Liberal Party will be, and after the resignation of Justin Trudeau is finalized, that new party leader automatically becomes the prime minister. So there's no general election going on. Parliament doesn't change at all at this point, but we end up with a new prime minister of Canada because the leader of the leading party in the parliament has been replaced. Yeah. So this has happened in the past. There have been other PMs who have stepped down, resigned while their party was still in power. So the new leader automatically takes over as PM. So we're still going to have an election no later than this October, but they could still end up with a vote of no confidence, or the new prime minister might decide to call a snap election. And with everything that's happened, so our new prime minister will be Mark Carney. He is not a lifelong politician. He is a central banker. He ran the Central Bank of Canada.
He's like an economist or whatever.
Yeah,
he's married to an economist as well.
He's married to an economist. He is a central banker. He ran the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis, and Canada weathered that quite well overall. And then the UK hired him to run their central bank, sort of like through Brexit, which didn't go so well, but not to the fault of what the bank was trying to do. That was more on the political side. But anyway, that is who our new prime minister will be in Canada, is Mark Carney, and we'll see when the election happens. But the Liberals have surged back to life in the polls, and now they're basically neck and neck with the Conservatives. It seemed like it was absolutely no chance that the Liberals could stay in power after the next election, and now it looks like there's a fighting chance, which is a dramatic change in the Canadian political landscape. And yes, much of it to do in reaction to what President Donald Trump in the United States has been doing and saying about Canada. So there's a huge groundswell of Canadian patriotism. And as I've said in the past, I'm kind of heartened to see that all the political party leaders are kind of more aligned than different, certainly than I've seen them in the past.
Happen during times of war. I mean, it's not an actual
trade war.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, it is a trade war. Yeah, it's not a military war yet, but it is a trade war.
I mean, I remember during Bush's, like after 9/11, during Bush's stuff, how unified the country was, and all kind of came behind, and then you would hear little whatever, and now little complaints here and there from the far left people who were like, wait a second, should we really be bombing the crap out of people who don't have anything already?
Well, I mean, Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the Conservative Party and was presumptively going to run away, becoming the new PM when our election does happen. I mean, he's back to criticizing Canada and how weak we are and how disjointed we are and all that stuff. Because
that doesn't sound familiar at all.
That's been the opposition party's stance for the past 9 years. Is everything you're doing is wrong. We don't really know what to do to make it right, but everything you're doing is wrong. So that's mainly been the criticism.
We're sure whatever it is different than what's been happening. So, and we're the only ones that'll be able to figure it out, but we don't. We have the concepts of a plan.
Yeah, so
fix that.
We'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, it's been exciting political times up here in Canada. Now everybody who had no idea that any of this was going on, because that's most of the world who's not paying attention to Canada's political system.
And nobody knows what the Kardashians' neighbors are doing. I'll tell you that much. That's kind of how that works. Well, good for you guys. Good for you guys. It's interesting. I mean, I'm telling you, the more I learned about the parliamentary system, which I never really understood. Okay. I'll tell you what, I don't really love. Whenever I think of Parliament, I think of like the British Parliament and people yelling at each other, and talking over the top of each other. And I feel like that the quorum in those meeting things or whatever that I see it feels disrespectful to me, and I don't like it. And that's just me. That's just me personally. I'm not talking about as an American or anything. Just as a person, I'm like, don't do that. That's like we're not allowed to do that in elementary school classrooms. And
talking
you guys
over each other, the
heckling.
Okay.
Yeah, the heckling and all that stuff just irritates me. So whenever I think of Parliament, I associate it with that. But the more that I've learned about the parliamentary system, where you vote for a party and not a person, the more I like it personally. Now, whether that's right for the United States or not remains to be seen.
And the methods of voting in parliamentary systems can vary drastically because, in Canada, we don't have a ranked vote, which many other parliaments do. You'll have your first choice, but you'll also list your second and third choice, and they'll kind of accumulate the votes. And so you could end up where if 80% of the country agrees on the second choice, then that's who will go in, as opposed to a smaller amount has different first choices. So we don't do that in Canada, so we have different system there. But I mean, Germany had elections not that long ago. So some rather large changes happening in Germany's parliament as well. They're supposedly going to have a new chancellor, although with their system, if some kind of minority coalition were able to form, it's possible for the current chancellor to still remain chancellor while his party has a drastic minority in their parliament. So yeah, all kinds of interesting political systems around the world.
It's funny how the word chancellor, because of the whole Star Wars thing.
Sure.
has such a negative connotation in the United States. You're just like, oh, Chancellor Palpatine. Well, it's so stupid.
There were clearly some influences on Star Wars there that
a little bit. You
not
think?
Super
not
subtle.
You don't think it was subtle? All these people that I see with the Empire was right stickers on the back of their raised trucks.
Who knows? In the next coming trilogy, in the episodes 10, 11, 12, perhaps there'll be a galactic president. It could be super subtle.
An orange alien from the planet Golf.
Right. Yes.
All right. So, yes, what's been going on with me? Last time we were here, I guess it was back issues was mostly what I'm talking about. Still sort of lingering, but I'm cycling again, and no, I don't want to talk about it. My son's home. One of my sons, fortunately for a very small apartment, our two sons have consecutive but not overlapping spring breaks.
Okay.
So the one extra bedroom we have is because it's a 3-bedroom apartment. Yeah, so we're able to transition from one son to the other. Now the son who's home right now is home from Tallahassee, which is like 5 or 6 hours away. I don't remember exactly how far it is. And the other son lives up in Tampa, which is like 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. So the 45-minute away son, I think, is not coming home. My wife is like, no, he's going to come home. I'm like, no, he's not. He's not coming home. He's kind of trying to be a Twitch streamer, and he's, he really, there's nothing for him here. He's not going to bring his computer home. He has as many friends up there as he has down here, which is almost none. And it's not that he is not he's not alone. He's not really like, an introvert.
Okay.
He just doesn't do anything. I don't know how to say that. You know what I mean? It's like when you take him places and you make him do things with groups, he is almost the life of the party.
Okay.
He really is. He gets out there and he's, talking to people and making jokes. And like when I was walking around campus with him, people would like, light up when they saw him.
Okay.
Oh, whatever. I've actually had some people that he lived near, not with, but near in his dorm be like, "This is your son? Oh my God, he's so great." And blah, blah, blah. And like talking to me, I'm like, him? Are you sure?
Sometimes kids behave differently around their parents than they do around other people, especially when their parents aren't around.
Yeah, no, and but he is very much a homebody, and his right now, he right before the hurricanes hit, he put together that gaming computer for himself, and he is very tied to it, and it is going to be at this place in
Right.
in Tampa. So
yeah, and I mean, given your current living situation, it's not quite the same as coming back to a much bigger house, much bigger room type of thing. It's kind of like where he's staying now versus where you're staying now. Not a gigantic amount of change in space for him. So yeah, I can see that.
So we'll see if he comes home or not. I don't know, but so this week is spring break for my Tallahassee son, and he's learning the lesson I learned. I think all of us learned at some point when we were in college, which is, at some point you come back from college and you go home and you expect things to have stayed the same.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
So you expect your friends to be there, and all the parties and stuff that you would go to, or all the social things you would go to would still be available. And you get back and you're like, my friends are working, or they're at school, or their spring breaks don't overlap,
or they have new relationships.
They are busy, and here I am during the week doing nothing.
Right.
I mean, he's just been doing nothing. So, and while that's fine for the first couple of days, he is not a homebody.
Okay.
He is a social butterfly. He's very active. He likes to play sports. He likes, like the last time he was home, right before he went off to college, we barely saw him. We're like, dude, do you even live here? Because he was always playing spike ball or pickleball, or going to the beach, or playing basketball, or going to play poker with his friends, or going to parties. And now that his first year of school is 2/3 of the way over, he's coming back and like, there's nobody here right now. So he's going to borrow a car today and go up to Gainesville to UF, which University of Florida, where some of his friends go to school, and hang out there because they don't have spring break this week either. So he's going up there to go hang out with them and party at UF, I guess. So that's exciting for him.
Sounds right for the age. Sounds correct.
Yeah. It's kind of neat seeing. There is always, I was a teenager. I was in college.
One would think there was a stage.
We all remember maybe not making the world's best life decisions at those ages, but seeing him go up and kind of live his life and do his stuff is very exciting for me. My wife is a little more concerned. But because she's so concerned, I don't have to be. So that's nice.
I'm sure she likes that deal.
Hey, I didn't choose the roles. She decided to be the one that was going to be the worry ward. I used to lose sleep over worrying all the time when I was in college and my early career, and then I married her, and she worries about a lot of stuff.
Okay.
And I was like, whew, well, she's got it. I'm going to sleep like a baby tonight.
Lovely.
Such a bad husband. All right, Rob, what did you watch?
Yes, I did take in one movie this week, which was Heretic. I've been looking forward to watching this. This is another A24 film. They seem to be way more hits than misses coming out of A24. Really liking that studio. So this I would definitely classify as a thriller. It is sometimes labeled as a horror, but other than one or two little jump scares and one or two kind of creepy moments, this is definitely definitely much more thriller than it is horror. So this is a very small, little contained movie. One house, maybe 3 rooms throughout this house, and it is Hugh Grant as the owner of the house, Mr. Reed, and 2 Mormon missionary girls, played by Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. They knock on his door because we don't see the interaction, but by the dialogue, they're saying in the past they sort of just met him in a parking lot, and he expressed interest in learning about, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so they swing by his place, and a psychological thriller creepiness ensues as he invites them into his home, which, as 2 women missionaries, they're not supposed to go into his house without a woman present. That's part of the rules. That's I don't know if that's completely true to real life, but it's certainly stated in the movie as being the rules, so with internal movie logic. But with his Hugh Grant charm and claiming that he has a wife who's in the back room taking care of a pie at the moment, he manages to get them into the front door, after which point it's very, very difficult to leave through the same front door that they just entered. So that's really the whole premise. Almost entirely what makes it a thriller, because the conversations that they have, and this is a talky movie. 3/4 of this movie is just the conversation of these 3 characters. And it's compelling in that the delivery, particularly by Hugh Grant, who's doing most of the talking, the dialogue is good. It's not that I think the ideas, because they're discussing religion. That's what this movie is. They're discussing religion. And it's not that I think the ideas are things I've never heard before or particularly radical in that, but the delivery of it and the writing of it is solid enough that it's compelling to just watch this conversation. And then it has this underlying tension of knowing that these women are unable to leave this conversation, even though the conversation itself, if you're just reading a transcript, is not particularly morose or scary or anything like that, but it's the situation.
That's the undertone.
It's the undertone of it. The performances of the 2 women, Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, I thought this was really, really well cast, because they don't have a tremendous amount of dialogue, certainly compared to how much Hugh Grant is speaking, but they play that uncomfortable. One of them is much more timid than the other. The 2 characters could be named Fight and Flight, because that is clearly what they are representing, and they play those roles really, really well. I'm not super familiar with either of the actresses. Sophie Thatcher had a leading role in Yellow Jackets, but I haven't watched that series yet, so I wasn't super familiar with her. Chloe East, I really didn't recognize at all, although she was in The Fabelmans. I thought the performance is all around really strong. That's the key to this movie. There's one really cool effects shot, because this is by no means an effects-heavy movie, but there is one really cool effects shot that was in no way realistic. It was completely stylized and a little bit out of place, but it was so cool. Rule of cool wins. It was so well done, so well executed that it was a really charming little moment that went on there. And so, like many thrillers, like many horrors, unfortunately, at the very end, when we're sort of getting to the conclusion and, revealing everything that Hugh Grant's character has been about, it's, to me, a little bit disappointing. It kind of devolved into a pretty simplistic explanation of who this man really is, what's really behind his motivations. And I was kind of like, I wish they could have come up with something a little bit more surprising or elaborate or something like that, because he's portrayed as this very intelligent, certainly very well-spoken character, but ultimately I thought what was motivating him was a little bit disappointing. They didn't go down the route whatsoever of making this sexualized, which in real life it almost certainly would be, because practically every crime of this nature is sexually motivated in real life. They very purposefully and obviously did not want that to be the case here. But yes, then the alternate motivation is exactly what you're guessing, and so that was a little bit disappointing that it wasn't a little bit more creative in its ultimate conclusion. But yeah, really strong performances, well executed. The tension is there. If you are someone who maybe is a little bit more like Chloe East's character, where you're a bit more sheltered, a bit more naive, haven't engaged in a ton of, really wide-ranging religious debate, maybe there will be a bunch of ideas presented in here. I mean, one of the effective parts of this is me being a non-religious person, like most of what Hugh Grant's character was saying for 3/4 of this movie, I was like, well, I'm a little bit more on his character's side, to be honest. And it was well done that way. And like I say, if you're just reading a transcript, it's like, okay, it was well written, it's well delivered. But yeah, that underlying tension was there. So I definitely give it a thumbs up. It's not like way through the roof thumbs up, because I was a little bit let down by the ultimate conclusion of it. But yeah, overall, I definitely think it's worth a watch. And it's about an hour and 35 minutes, so it's not going to eat up a ton of your time or waste its time. I did feel like it could have maybe been a little bit longer in that a little bit more set up at the beginning. Wouldn't have been a problem to me. I wouldn't have minded spending a little bit more time with the two women and seeing maybe a couple other interactions before they get to Hugh Grant. They speed through that in that they just have them walk by and say a few words to people on the street, but no other like sort of missionary interactions like they're having with him.
Oh yeah.
So
have them go to a few doors first.
Yeah, just a little bit. Like they did try to pepper that in really quickly, like just passing through the street, but it was come and gone so quickly that it was clear that they were like, okay, get to the meat. they were trying to sort of hurry it up and do that, which I appreciate, but I felt like a little bit more time. But I felt like the quick introduction, I was like, okay, I like these women. I'm on their side. I do care about them, and they established that really quickly and effectively, and largely because of the non-verbal performances of the two actresses. So yeah, lots to like here, and then yeah, a little mark off. I don't know, 4 out of 5 stars, I guess I would say.
I think why? No.
What's going on? Something's happening over on Tom's side. That's just silence there, Tom. We don't know.
No, I know, but I just heard a sound.
Yes.
Like a notification. Did you hear that?
I did not hear any notification.
Okay, so maybe it was just in my headphones. I'm just trying to make sure that it's not going over the computer speakers. It was weird. To your point about dialogue, and I don't know why anyone listening to this podcast would ever do this, but if you ever read a Harold Pinter play,
okay,
there was a movie made with Jeremy Irons, I believe, called Deception, or I think it was called Deception or something like that. It's about a relationship, divorce sort of thing, and it's in reverse chronological order. But if you read, there's no words.
Okay, right. Yeah.
It's like it's just very. There's a couple of. There's no big monologues like you would expect there to be in plays. There's no, it's just conjunctions half the time of people saying back and forth to each other. Yeah. You're like, what am I reading?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I read it, and I was like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing happening, and then you see it performed,
right?
And that performance brings out what it is that is. That underlying tension between these two people who are actually in an argument, and they're just not talking to each other at the same time as talking to each other, sort of thing. So it's funny that not funny, but that's what your review of Heretic reminds me of. I watched some things this weekend. This week. I did watch the first episode of Daredevil. There's 2 out.
Daredevil Born Again is
Born Again.
Series,
that's right.
Yes.
And as a whole, I liked it.
Okay.
I didn't hate it.
Okay.
There is some CGI at the beginning of this thing, which maybe looks really good on the big screen or on the screen or on an LG or an OLED or something like that, which looked terrible on my itty-bitty.
Makes me think that if it were blown up to be mega-sized, it's probably not going to look a ton better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's just say, it just didn't look natural.
Okay.
So so in the Daredevil comics, he uses his weird nunchuck things to swing around like Spider-Man. So like there's methods of transportation, right?
Okay.
And we've seen this in different comic book movies and comic book
Swinging
adaptations.
physics?
Swinging physics is one of them. Batman has the batarang thingy that he does sometimes,
hook.
and of course Spider-Man with the webs.
Yes.
But Daredevil also does that with his little weird thingies, which doesn't make any sense to me and never has. Especially the minute that they're like, okay, well, let's have this person who is based in New York where there's buildings everywhere, and even where there's buildings everywhere, there's not buildings everywhere. The guy's going to end up walking a lot. There just is.
Yes, and his retractable sticks are not sticky like Spider-Man's webs, and they don't have hooks on them. So if they actually wrapped around something strongly enough to support his weight, then how do they detach once it's time?
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
That's comic book logic for you for sure.
But the way he swung to and around things was just like, it didn't look right at all.
Okay.
And it just didn't to me. And that's fine because it only happened at the very beginning and then it was done. Because there was more of a flashback. But the episode as a whole, I thought was pretty good. Vincent D'Onofrio's back. I can never say his last name right. He is apparently, and I have been wrong this whole time, I thought he was just fat. Like, I thought he had gotten fat. Right? And then, like, he's the type of actor that would put on weight for a
he would do
role.
that. Yeah.
So I just assumed that that's what happened. He is not. I saw him. He is a perfectly normal-sized human being.
Well, he's very tall, though. He is very tall in real life.
He is. Yeah. And he has played some of my absolute favorite roles that he has played some things where I've been like, my Lord.
I very much enjoy him as Wilson Fisk in the series.
And he is good in this. He is good in this as you would expect. But they've also thinned him down. Like I think he's tired of wearing that fat suit thingy. And he has thinned down for this, which to me is not great for the Kingpin part of it. But if that's what the actor needs, that's what the actor needs. I'm fine. I'll take his performance in this. And
time has passed; things have changed in the Daredevil series. So
the whole thing though is that he's supposed to be kind of bulletproof because of his bulk.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
That's sort of the thing. So, but whatever. But overall, so the big scene they keep showing you in the previews, which is them talking at the diner.
Yeah.
I think everyone thinks, just like any, people who don't know how to do something often assume that when they see something done well, that it must be easy because it looks so effortless.
Right.
I think people think that, and you can love or hate Quentin Tarantino, that man can film a conversation and make it seem very tense and very scary, and lots of the cinematography makes a big difference.
Right. That ties back to Heretic too. That sounds very similar in that way.
And that conversation between him and between Daredevil and the Kingpin is meant to be that way. It's meant to have all this the
history,
tension,
the tension,
this threat underlying, and boy, is it not there.
Oh dear. Okay. And I mean, they've had that sort of scene effectively in the previous Netflix Daredevil series. It's not that we've had interactions between Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk where they're just speaking in the scene, and it does have all of that tension that you want. So it has been done before with those actors.
I don't know if it's the music or lack thereof, or maybe it's because I'm watching it on my laptop. I'm not beyond saying it's me.
Okay.
And there could have been other things going on in the house because I was watching this by myself, but there was, other things happening. So maybe I just didn't sense it or didn't feel it the way that it should have been there.
It's usually
there for other
timing,
people.
Though. It's all about timing in the editing. It's those little insert shots. It's those pauses that have to be just the right length. That's what gives the effect of the tension underlying things.
Yeah, and the slow zoom in as somebody's talking, and the angles, and everything else. There's just a lot that has to happen right to make that happen. I did not feel that in that conversation. As a whole, I enjoyed the episode, and I'm interested to see where this story is going to go. I don't think it's very subtle where it's going to go, but maybe it is.
They might pull a fast one on you. There might be a twist.
Historically with Daredevil, like the first couple episodes are great, and then there's a whole bunch of
lull
filler
in the middle, and then we get back to it at the end. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that doesn't happen here. That's really what I hope for. The other thing we've been watching, my wife and I think I've talked about this, The Night Agent, which is a TV show on it's a series, Netflix original series.
You're doing second season of this, yeah?
Second season. And I will not give you a review of it because it doesn't really matter what I think, because it is what it is. It's sort of like it's like a Patterson or Reacher or whatever type of, Tom Cruise-y show where there's a lot of tension, a lot of political intrigue. And
an agent of some sort.
Yes.
Somewhat superpowered, even though they're not in a superpowered universe.
Well, he's not really superpowered, this kid, but I call him kid because everybody's younger than me. But, there's this, who am I thinking of? Harrison Ford played the Patriot Games. Who's the character?
Jack Ryan?
Jack Ryan. Okay. It's more of a Jack Ryan sort of situation. And it's fine. And from my perspective, I'm like, I spend a lot of time going, yeah, that's not how that conversation would go. And boy, that nobody would have done that sort of thing. It's not very realistic. But my wife is like, this is too tense. I can't watch anymore. Oh, okay. so she is really into it. Okay. And like last night, we're on episodes. We just finished episode 7, I believe. So there's 3 episodes left. And last night she's like, I can't watch another episode tonight. I need to get a good night's sleep. I'm like, oh my, okay. Mm-hmm. So if that is, there's definitely tension there. Yeah, and that's fun. To speak to the point of the Daredevil thing, there is there are very many situations where people are definitely in danger, and they know they're in danger, and they're in danger, but you're not sure if there is actual danger. Okay. So conversations start happening, and the character is like freaking out, but trying to hold it together, and then it either turns out okay or it doesn't. But that tension is clearly there. Okay. So whatever I did not see in the Daredevil conversation, I definitely saw in the Night Agent stuff.
Yeah, it's a good comparison study.
I think overall it's definitely worth a watch. Again, you have to have a suspension of disbelief for these things, because after a while you're like, listen, all of you people are going to prison.
No. Most things require that. I'll forgive that. As long as there's internal logic that goes on, I will suspend disbelief. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, let me tell you, I know. Like in the first season, he saves the president, and so therefore the president sort of forgives him of all the stuff that he did wrong in order to save the president. But you're like, no, you don't. No.
On that suspension of disbelief thing, that one last comment about Heretic, because you do have a situation where, so it's Hugh Grant, looking like the age that he is now, and then you have these 2 women who are about 20 years old or so. And I mean, they are physically smaller than him. They are, by their nature, much more reserved, held back, timid type of people in general. But it was like, I didn't get the physical threat sensation whatsoever, because I was like, no, there's 2 of you. You're younger and clearly much faster than Hugh Grant is, and I'm like, you could overpower this man, the 2 of you. So I was like, there was a little bit of that, but I mean, they did a good enough job that it was psychologically that he was holding them there with his distractions in conversation. It was much less of a physical threat, but they pay some lip service to the notion that there could be a physical resolution to their issue, but they never venture down that path. So that's a little bit of a suspension of disbelief there. You have to believe that he had enough mind control over them that he didn't have it. Like, I was like, what if it were Michael Fassbender or something like that? Then I'd be like, oh, even with the 2 of them, I don't know if physically they could go after him, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in real life that happens, though. I think in real life afterwards, people, because you hear that, unfortunately, from awful people on the internet, like, why didn't you just fight back?
Well, and I mean, when it's absolutely like not your nature to ever consider a violent resolution to things, then it's not even in their minds that would be the way to do things.
It would not be an option. Yeah. Interesting. I think I'd like to see that movie.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. It's worth a watch.
I think I'd like to see that. All right, let's get started with the podcast. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to the website, find our episodes, our show notes, and our links to the Flickr album that has all the pictures in it, as well as any products or articles we will mention. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. That's our live recording sessions. The Flickr album photos will be integrated into the video, so you don't have to scroll.
But you can find it on Flickr if you're just following the audio only and you want to see what we're referencing.
I think it's funny that Flickr still exists. Yeah. How do they make money? Is it ads? Are there ads?
Yeah, there's ads. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, good for them.
Yeah.
I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is go into avrant.com, click on the buy us a cup of coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. We want to thank Raf for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Raf.
Yes, we do. Raf, thank you so much for that PayPal donation. We very much appreciate your financial support.
Already out of coffee. I lost control of my LinkedIn profile, and it's a problem. So I've been trying to... All morning I've been talking with LinkedIn, believe it or not. So I'm not all morning talking with. They sent me an email back to my help me. I've lost control of my LinkedIn account. And then they asked for more information. So I was writing it all up, and I did not drink enough coffee, so I need more coffee. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast. We have 130 patrons that every month the Patreon takes money from them and gives most of it to us, a minimum of $1. So thank you to our 130 patrons.
That is right. I'll say once again, it is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, so a big thank you to our 130 patrons over there.
We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Juls, Raf, John, who asked, is there a minimum contribution amount on our Patreon? Minimum is $1. That's their minimum.
We didn't set that. Yeah, that wasn't our choice. That is the minimum that Patreon will accept as an ongoing monthly automatic donation. $1, US dollar is the minimum.
Yeah, so John,
Yeah.
buck. $12 a year.
And also, I mean, I've heard people say that they haven't signed up for Patreon because they want to give us more than $1 a month, but they're kind of like either, struggling with it, or they're just kind of waiting until I'm like, we'll take the $1. You don't have to wait until you can.
Or the 70 cents or whatever.
$5 or 10 a month. I'm like, the $1 is absolutely fantastic by us.
That's fine. John, who says, thanks for persevering week to week. We're a bright spot in his commute.
Oh, that was actually
Brad,
David.
who thought our last episode was hilarious. Tom, such language.
Yes.
And he and his wife watched Twisters right after listening to Rob's review of it last week. That set his expectations very low. So then he was pleasantly surprised when they both thought it was fun. Maybe that's all that it's intended to be. Maybe Rob was just viewing it through too serious of a lens, although he can understand why if that was the case. And Dazz. So we got thanks from Jules, Raf, John, David, Fred, and Dazz. Thank you for thanking us.
That's right. I'll say the names one more time. Jules, Raf, John, David, Fred, and Dazz. Thank you so much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We very much appreciate them. And yeah, Fred, absolutely right. I mean, I don't know anybody who can truly put everything that's going on in the rest of their life aside to 100% focus solely on a movie and have no outside context going on. So I will absolutely accept that criticism. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I would rather go in with low expectations and be pleasantly surprised than the other way around. So that's great. And yeah, I did mention it was very clearly that they went for a lighter tone, despite the content, the topic at hand could have been treated in a different way. They very obviously intentionally went for a lighter tone throughout. So yeah, they were going for a more fun time versus it. They weren't, there were the moments of drama and tragedy, but they weren't going for a downer of a movie with twisters whatsoever. So sure. I'm in agreement with you. And yes, you're right. You were sensing that I was thinking of other things. I've mentioned that I have been these past several weeks. So there you go. Yeah,
that definitely, and I will say the same thing about the Daredevil conversation I was talking about earlier. That could just be the way it hit me at that moment. For what's been going on with us.
It's why revisiting movies later on in life can be very, very fun, because your initial impression of what you remember thinking about a movie can absolutely change when the context of the rest of your life has changed along with it.
Yeah. News. If you thought it was kind of impressive that the original NVIDIA Shield TV devices, which are now 10 years old, are still getting firmware updates, wait till you get a load of the updates Sony just released. Flashback to November 2006. That's when the PlayStation 3 first launched, and now it just got a new system software update in March 2025. I think somebody put the wrong date.
The update. There was a very much a reason behind this new system software update for the PlayStation 3.
And even more impressive, it's to keep Blu-ray movie playback working properly. The PS3's AACS encryption keys were about to expire, but this update will keep the Blu-ray playback working. So the rest of the world might be doing its best to try to forget that physical discs still exist, but not Sony. PS4 and PS5s will also get encryption key updates, but they don't require a whole system software update for those. They just download the newest keys if you ever pop a Blu-ray into their drives. Honestly, it actually reminds me. I wonder if my brother still has his PS3 working. I think I still have one at the house that was up high enough. I'm gonna have to go look. I might have lost that as well.
Have updated your router and your Wi-Fi credentials in the 19 years since the PS3 came out. Might be time to connect that thing back up to the internet. Make sure you can still play your Blu-ray discs in that PS3 console of yours.
And speaking of keeping movie discs functional, Warner Brothers has now acknowledged that due to the way their DVDs were authored at the time, from 2006 to 2008, more than 300 titles on DVD and HD DVD. Flash.
I got some of those. I got to check after this news. I got HD DVDs stored in boxes.
They are known and expected to now be suffering from disc rot or laser rot that makes them unplayable and unrippable. Nothing can be done to repair the discs, so Warner Brothers is offering to replace them for free where possible.
Yeah.
Okay. The gigantic caveat is that where possible, the defective discs have been replaced with the same title. However, as some of the effective titles are no longer in print or the rights have expired, consumers have been offered an exchange for a title of like value. Oh, geez.
Yeah, I know.
There were some not great discs out there to begin with. So it's like, here's 5 cents. If you own an affected disc, you can email WHV at WHV at WBD.com
That's
to get
right.
whatever replacement Warner Brothers is able to offer you. What? WHV?
Warner Home Video at WarnerBrothersDiscovery.com. That's the initials.
That is made to make people not be able to do it. It's like those license plate people, like custom license plates here in the States people get that, where it's all 8s and Bs and zeros, so that you can't tell. They think the cops won't be able to figure out what their license plate number is.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I think they'll figure it out. My dude.
No, I mean, I spotted a couple of titles. I bought the Blade Runner 5-disc collection, but I got the HD DVD version of it when that came out. I opted for that instead of the Blu-ray, because I think that was one of the ones where the Blu-ray just had 5.1 audio, but the HD DVD had 7.1 or something. There was some little reason like that. And then for my father, I've bought him pretty much the whole collection of the Looney Tunes Golden collection, and a couple of those, because they were released in volumes, but a couple of those are on this list, so that'd be a shame if those DVDs, those Looney Tunes Golden collection, because I don't know where else you can find a lot of those were from the Warner Brothers animation archives, and they really, they're not available to stream anywhere. You can't buy them on iTunes. It really was in that DVD collection was the last and only place that you might be able to find them, so I'll have to check those discs.
Get the newest. What is that cartoon basketball one that just came out last year or whatever?
Space Jam.
Space Jam. Everybody's getting Space Jam
Right.
to replace all their animation they can't get anymore. TCL said they'll be releasing their 2025 TV series one at a time throughout the year, and true to their word, they've now followed up with the January release of the QM6K series with the QM7K series.
You'll never guess what came next.
Guess what the next one's going to be?
Well, there is a surprise coming up in this announcement.
It's going to be a 4. Compared to last year's QM751 series, everything in the QM7K series goes up by 1,000. 2,500 zones of local dimming instead of 1,500, and 3,000 nits of peak light output versus 2,000. They've also got a new 115-inch model in the QM7K series.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, last year the one and only 115-inch model was the QM891. So now we've got the QM7K, brings it to a lower price point, 115 inches.
So micro lenses have been added to the mini-LED backlighting system to improve light output and efficiency, and they're using TCL's CSOT's newest HVA LCD panels for improved native contrast and viewing angles. They're already up for pre-order in the sizes from 55 to 115 inches, and they'll ship by the end of the month. So 115 inches is 20,000 $5,000.
Now, this is MSRP. If you just go over to Best Buy and look at the pre-order prices, everything is already discounted from the MSRP. So like the 98-inch. Yeah, the 98-inch QM7K, MSRP $5,000, but it's pre-orderable on Best Buy for $4,000 right away. It hasn't come out. It's not like they needed to run a sale, but yeah, that's
I'm telling you, that 85-inch 20 for what? It's probably $2,000. The 85-inch.
Yeah,
one.
It'll be like $2,200. I think is the going price.
Very tempting.
It's not bad. It's not bad. And so similar to last year. So like last year, the QM751 series was a step down from 2023's QM850 series, but not much. The 751 got pretty close to the 850 from the year preceding. So similarly here, now the new QM7K series is a step back, but not tremendously so from last year's 851 series. So that 7 series keeps going up and getting pretty close to the previous year's 8 series is kind of what's going on there. So yeah, they're pretty compelling, those offerings.
And a little tease, next up, TCL will skip ahead in the model numbers a bit to launch their flagship X11K series. So what is going on over there? The first to feature over 10,000 zones of local dimming, so stay tuned for that.
Those aren't cheap. The X11K series are not cheap.
Comments, Bob in the Philippines. After our comment last week about how easy it can be to overlook a single stray speaker wire strand or a bit of spider silk causing a short circuit that sends your receiver into protection mode, Bob realized he hadn't provided all the details that led him to conclude that his issues were heat-related instead. Yeah. You know what? Pete, okay, Bob, this is not about you.
Okay.
Okay.
You sent Tom off on a tangent here, Bob.
Just here comes the tangent because yesterday I got a bike up on the stand to work on, and the note was basic tune-up, which we don't actually do.
Okay.
But so I'm going to say basic tune-up for you guys because that's what you guys would think of it as. And the brakes squeak.
Okay.
And I'm like, this bike looks pretty clean. So I put it up on the stand and I start taking it apart to look at it. I'm like, what has actually happened to this bike? Like this thing is a mess, but it looks clean on the outside, but like there is like so much crap on it and so like on the parts that make it move.
Yeah. On the inside.
Everything is, and nothing works right. And I'm like trying to figure this thing out. And I'm given a certain amount of time to work on something. It's not really how it works at our shop, but you would, a basic tune-up should take a couple hours, max. And I'm working on this thing for like ever, it feels like. So the guy finally comes in to get the bike, and what he had told us was the brakes are squeaking. Yeah. Can you guys fix that? Yeah. And then we said, okay, we'll do this tune-up, basic tune-up, which again we don't do. We just say we're going to do. It's going to take us a couple hours to do that, to clean it up enough to get to the point where we can figure out what's wrong with the brakes, and it should take about that amount of time. And we give it back to them. The price tag's a lot higher because it took a lot longer. And we're like, dude, what happened? Oh yeah, I found the bike on a junk pile. And I took it out of the garbage and I sprayed it down with WD-40 and I brought it to you guys. Right. So that's why it looked clean, because the WD-40 does a good job.
Got rid of all the grease on the outside of it, sure.
But did not do it. But basically attracts grease to everything else and dirt to everything else on the drivetrain. And then also the bike had been submerged in water in the flood, and that's why it was broken. And that's why it had been thrown out in the first place. And this guy took it off in whatever. There's some amount of things that people do, and you do this to your doctor all the time. Doctor asks you how much exercise you do, or how much do you drink, and you basically lie. You're like, I'm not going to. If I don't say it, it's not true. Omission.
Yeah.
Yes. If I don't say it, then they'll never figure it out. The doctor knows. Okay. The doctor knows.
There's a piece of information missing here. Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, this person had not provided all the data, mostly because people are like, well, if I don't tell them this, then maybe it won't be true.
Yeah, or maybe it's not as bad as it might be, so I'll get away with it because
they're going to overcharge me if I tell them that I found this bike on a a junk heap, they're going to we would have told you it's going to cost you way too much to fix this thing. And it's not fixed. I did as best I could, but one of the brakes is still weird. They still squeak a little bit, and it won't shift right because someone threw it away for a reason, dummy.
Yeah.
So back to Bob. First up, he's using pre-terminated cables, speaker cables from SVS, but even so, he tried unplugging both ends of all the cables. He opened each and every banana plug to inspect the wire connection inside, and he cleaned up all the binding posts on the receiver and on every speaker with a paintbrush and compressed air, so there's no spider webs on this stuff. He tried connecting only one speaker at a time, including the Zone 2 outputs, and he took the cover off his DIN and cleaned it thoroughly inside. No matter what, after about 30 minutes, it would go silent and blink its light in protection mode. And since he's already gone through the nightmare of getting the power supply on this LG OLED replaced under warranty, did not want to bother with the hassle of that is electronics repair in the Philippines. Right, I remember this. So he clicked buy on his Marantz Cinema 50 replacement. It was delivered 2 days later. It's got all the features he wants now and in the near future. And he had always been curious to hear the Marantz sound, which sounds exactly like the Canon sound and the Yamaha sound.
Well, it's got a little high-frequency roll-off that has been revealed now that you can change between the Marantz sound and flat. That option is there now.
So that ended up being an easy decision. He appreciated Rob's suggestion to take some tweaks into the setting. Running Odyssey did result in his front speakers being set to large, so he manually changed that to small with a 60 Hz crossover. He's turned off all the ways that dynamic range compression might accidentally get applied. And he's trying out auto eco mode as Rob suggested. It sounds good. Dialogue is clearer than he ever remembers when he was using the Denon, and he likes it. So he's not touching anything anymore. Well, fair enough. So clearly something can go wrong with receivers. There's no doubt about that. So if we had known that he had tried all these things, we would not have suggested that he tried the things that he had already done. So yes, that is good. I will say, though, the dialogue being clearer than he ever remembers. I just put a new wheel on my bike. Just one. Because we found this very expensive, but used wheel floating around the shop and we don't know where it came from. So usually when that happens, there's one of two things. A bike has been wrecked and people bring the bike in and say, how much will you give me for the parts that are on this thing? And we'll give them some sort of store credit, or we'll say nothing. Usually we say nothing and then they go away. But somehow this wheel came off of a bike and it's perfectly good, but the rest of the bike got wrecked and we're not sure if it's good or we're not sure whatever. Or it was wrecked and we told the person you shouldn't use this wheel anymore, and we sold them another one, or we sent them to go get another one, more likely because we don't have wheels that are this expensive. And then the wheel just ends up in the shop and we're supposed to throw it away and we forget, or it gets tucked in the corner or whatever. So anyway, so we found this wheel. And it's an expensive wheel. It's carbon fiber. My wheels are aluminum or whatever they're normally made out of. And it's a rear wheel, which is where most of your weight goes. And honestly, if the wheel blows up, I mean, if it fails, it's not as catastrophic as if it's a front wheel. If it's a front wheel, you'll go and crash, and it's really bad.
It'll affect your steering.
Rear wheel tends to the back of the bike drops down, and then yes, you'll crash, but it's not nearly as catastrophic. So I put it on my bike, and because we cannot find anything wrong with it. Like we've looked, we're trying to. I mean, we don't have an MRI machine, which is what you really need for carbon fiber. But whatever, we've looked and we can't figure out what's wrong with it. It's pretty straight, which just means it's been used, which we knew that already. So I put it on there, and the owner said, how's it feel? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it feels a little bit better. It's supposed to be faster. I don't really feel any faster, whatever. But again, we talk about this all the time on the podcast. Dialogue being clearer than he ever remembers. Were you really paying attention to it right before you started using your last?
Maybe turned it up a little bit louder because you got the new toy.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that could have happened that would affect that. So I'm glad that you think that it's clearer. Could be the case. Could be you ran Odyssey a little better than you read. You're better at running Odyssey. You're better at whatever. But it's so hard to. Like I did write an article on AV Gadgets that's called like everyone who says that there's a small improvement to their sound is lying or something along those lines, because that's what it is. Those small improvements is just It's so
But there's certainly no reason to expect that you would be dissatisfied with a Marantz Cinema 50. It's a great AV receiver, so if you are happy with it, that's what matters. And there's no reason at all for us to rain on that parade. So congratulations,
no, for sure.
and we're glad that you got that and you're happy with it.
Everyone that says their AV upgrade is slightly better is a liar. That's the name of the article, and I'm going to put it in here so you can read it yourself.
We'll have a link in the show notes. You can read it for yourself. That's right.
And I don't mean that in the negative. You'll read the article, you'll see that. I don't mean that in a negative way. Anyways, Nathan wanted to mention a site that he thinks is a good resource for evaluating hearing aids and hearing protection. This is interesting. HearAdvisor, which is Hear and Advisor are both capitalized, but it's one word, measures these sorts of devices, and they provide audio samples for all the products they've tested on their website. You can listen to the original audio and then a simulation of what it sounds like wearing the hearing protection normally. But then they also have a level match simulation so that you compare the sound quality and how different it sounds in tone and timbre without the change in volume coloring your judgment. They have a whole section just for earplugs that you might want to wear at a live concert. They did rate the etymodic whatever earplugs highly, but Nathan finds the triple flange design physically uncomfortable. So he ended up with the loop switch used in its middle setting. I have no idea what that means. And while he doesn't think they sound as neutral, he does find them way more comfortable. Fair enough. Also worth noting, Apple's AirPods Pro 2 scored well, and HearAdvisor's audio demos have them sounding very transparent to the original sound quality, but just pleasantly quieter. So they're both worth considering if you were maybe thinking of getting a pair to use as wireless earphones anyways. Yeah,
I mean, they clearly cost much, much more than just passive earplugs of any sort. But yeah, if you were like, maybe I'll get AirPods Pro anyway, just because I want new wireless earphones, he's like, the hearing protection on them is effective and very transparent to the sound. They do a good job of passing the sound through without changing the tone and timbre, just knocking it down by 10 or 12 dB.
Yeah, the problem with in-ear monitors is that you have to be it's very hard to get the tips correct. For me at least. I do this all the time. And one of my problems is I lost all I had like all these bags,
all the other sizes of tips, all
the different sizes. Whatever's in them now is what I'm stuck with because they all got flooded and washed away because they were in little Ziploc bags in a box on this one piece of furniture that dumped over in the flood, and so they're all gone. They just but. The newest earbuds I've been listening to lately, they've stopped having what I would call a neutral mode.
Okay.
It's just different levels of letting stuff through.
Okay.
So like in the middle is what you would think to be just like having them in, but it's not. It's always active in some way. And which is interesting to me. Because then you just have like the slider that slides back and forth from like, blocking out all, not blocking out sound, but like the noise canceling to letting everything through. So it's interesting to me what direction we're going to end up going with these things. But I think that using in-ear buds, because I saw it when we went to the races, and a lot of people were doing that. They were just wearing headphones to kind of block the sound. I'm like, okay, I mean, that's something, but it's not everything.
I'd rather people have hearing protection of some kind than no hearing protection at all. So if earbuds get people on board with that, because it's just easy to socially accept and all that, then I'm all for it, because we need to protect our hearing.
Questions. Rob X. First up, Rod heard us recommend the Zidoo media players to another listener. For anyone who wants to play back movies they have backed up onto a hard drive with full audio and video quality. He tried out the Zidoo Z9X 8K. This is me rolling my eyes at the 8K port. And he's super happy with it. So he says thank you. And he loves that the MKV files just play with no hassle and full Dolby Vision and Atmos and in 24 frames per second. The movie poster art that it automatically downloads is pretty sweet too, so it's been wonderful. Now, even though the Zidoo interface is built on top of Android, it is not a streaming video box by default. He's seen people hack it in various ways to include streaming video apps, but just in terms of what its own interface offers without any hacking, it's for playing your own locally stored content or accessing cloud storage, but not for regular Android apps. It does, however, offer a limited number of music streaming apps that you can easily download from its own interface. Spotify, Tidal, and Apple Music are all there. But he doesn't subscribe to any of those. He chose to subscribe to YouTube Premium, which comes with YouTube Music. So he'd rather just keep using that, but there's no YouTube Music app available to download from the Zidoo interface. So is there a way to rig this thing to use YouTube Music? I don't know.
So officially, no. What you are seeing in its own available apps interface is what is officially supported. But as you mentioned, this thing is just an interface on top of Android as the basic OS underneath. And so people have, come up with ways of hacking it, because if you can side load an Android app onto the device, then that's how you can get other services. So it's totally up to you whether you want to venture down that path. I wouldn't say it's tremendously difficult. You can download these files from GitHub. And it's sort of a two-stage process to basically prepare the Zidoo box for side loading of non-official Android apps to play on that box, and then loading the actual program that you would use. So there used to be a YouTube Android hack program called Vanced, which sort of, let you do things that YouTube doesn't really want you to do, like bypass a lot of the advertising or organize your videos in ways that aren't officially supported by YouTube. So that's a little bit out of date. You could give the original Vanced program a try, but it wasn't like specifically for YouTube Music. So people have continued to work on that open source code, and now there is one called Revanced, and one that is for YouTube, the general videos, and then one that is specifically for YouTube Music. So that would be the way to rig your Zidoo player to be able to play back YouTube Music specifically. You could use that Revanced program. I'll have a link to where you can look through the procedure for putting Revanced on your Zidoo if you want to. But yeah, that is not official. That is, technically a hack, an Android hack of the system. But if you want to risk giving it a try, I'll leave that up to you. And Revanced YouTube Music is the way that you could do that.
All right, sorry, I had to get more coffee, but also my son is leaving, and I needed to talk to him before he went. Gurinder tried running some sweeps through a center speaker in pure direct mode and taking some measurements using Room EQ Wizard. He used its ISO 3382 standard to view his room decay times, and he noticed that he might be a little too low, meaning his room is overdamped.
Yeah, if you're looking for it in the interface, it's the impulse response filtered tab that goes on there. IR filtered tab. IR standing for impulse response, not infrared in this case. But that's where this decay times chart shows up according to those ISO 3382 standards for measuring and displaying decay times.
So early decay times were all highlighted and had figures close to or under 100 milliseconds for the most part, and RT60 times seemed fairly even from 630 hertz on up, but they hovered around 130 to 150 milliseconds.
Yeah, for that whole range. So mid-range and treble was all around 130 to 150 milliseconds.
And 250 hertz to 500 hertz, the RT60 times were below 100 milliseconds, and then gradually climbed with a bit of unevenness here and there below 250 hertz. But it doesn't sound overdamped to his ears, and hasn't fully dialed in all of his settings yet or run room correction. The room is a little over 1,400 cubic feet, and all he did was put up absorption panels and bass traps in different spots. Should he take some down? No. There's no world in which I say yes.
Okay.
There is no world in which I say. And then this is the thing. I mean, we're talking... there's overdamped and then there's overdamped. I mean, people having a little bit extra dead, to me, is better than having it and that little extra live.
Yeah, if you look at the Dolby Recording Studio recommendations for decay times, there's a whole range that's allowable within Dolby specification for a recording studio. Now that's not a playback situation, but it is the sort of environment where mixes and mastering are being made in many occasions, and their sort of minimum threshold is right around 100 milliseconds. That is sort of the lower end threshold. So it's not like you're actually way out of spec. You're getting close to a very dry sounding recording studio type of sound, but not way out of spec to the degree that you absolutely must make a change. But that is all assuming that those figures are actually accurate. And in the case of ISO 3382, that standard for decay times, it also includes, if you're wholly going for the standard, a particular methodology for the playback of the test signals, and then the microphone measurement of those test signals. And you're not following that full procedure when you're doing regular Room EQ Wizard type of measurements. So, I mean, first of all, it's supposed to be an omnidirectional speaker. So it's like one of those like 20-sided speakers, like sort of looks like a ball that you put up on a stick so that it's equidistant from ceiling and floor. And that is playing what amounts to what sounds like a gunshot. I mean, it's actually like impulse white noise, but it sounds like a gunshot when it goes off. And then there's this sort of zigzagging 2 meters apart microphone positioning schema diagram that you're supposed to follow if you're fully doing ISO 3382. So Room EQ Wizard does its best to calculate and approximate and apply some transfer function calculations to give you a pretty reasonable approximation of what it would be had you followed ISO 3382. But you'll notice that in that IR filtered section, any of the figures that are highlighted in the yellow color, that means it is outside of what they consider the acceptable range of approximation. They're like, basically, don't trust this figure. We might be wrong about this figure. And pretty much all of the early decay times, which is basically RT10, it's basically how long it takes for the sound to decay by 10 decibels. All of those were highlighted in Gurinder's figures. They're like, probably don't put a lot of trust into these early decay time figures. We don't know if that's actually accurate to the ISO 3382 standard. And then for the RT60 times, which are shown as T-optimal, T-O-P-T, T-optimal, those ones weren't like highlighted as being untrustworthy or anything like that, but Room EQ Wizard is basically looking for the curve of best fit for what is more or less expected in the range of decay times. And it's like, okay, well, this section of your measurement graph, because you're playing a much longer sweep, it's not a gunshot type of sound when you're doing the Room EQ Wizard measurement. It's a, quite easily recognizable full frequency range sweep that's being measured. So there it's like, well, what section of that measurement, what gating of time created a curve of best fit that approximates well what the anticipated results. Like there's basically a lot of estimation going on in that reading that you've got there. So I wouldn't put like 100% faith. I'm not saying it's completely, utterly useless because it's well calculated. It's not like there are proper standards for how you make those translations and calculations, and Room EQ Wizard is following that. If you look at the waterfall graph, you're not going to see decay time figures that are wildly different than what you're seeing in this approximated ISO chart. But it is an indication of like, okay, don't take it as like gospel that if you see one reading that kind of looks like an outlier, it probably is an outlier in this case, as opposed to being like, oh, at this particular frequency, it's too overdamped and I should do something about it. Take a step back there. Take a pause on that. It's more likely in this case to be an outlier than an indication that there's genuinely a problem of too short decay times in your room now. Chances are, like, if you look at your waterfall graph, you probably got short decay times. It's not like they're going to be so worlds apart where the approximation of ISO 3382 is telling you that you've got 150 milliseconds and then the waterfall graph is giving you 700. It's not going to be like that type of difference. But if you look at the waterfall graph and everything is sort of in that 100 to 200 millisecond range, you are definitely on the drier side of things. No question about that. But you're within acceptable ranges for standard industry practices. So if to you you're like, okay, it doesn't sound overdamped to me, it's certainly not reverberant in your room, that would be shocking. But you're like, no, it sounds reasonable, it doesn't sound horrible and dead in here, then no, there's no reason to take down what you've put up.
So let's take a kind of a step back about measurements real quick. So in psychology, my field of psychology, which is research on and evaluation, there's there's a danger that we have to be careful of taking too many measurements. So the thought process behind most people, and I think this is a natural thought process, and I don't blame anybody for it because I often fall victim to this bias as well, is that if a thing is real, you can measure it 1,000,000 times, and then in 1,000,000 times it will come out
repeatable,
no
reliable,
million
predictable.
different ways. Yeah. Yes, it's all reliable. It will always come out correct. So it will always show in the measurement. So if you take if something is an inch long, you can measure it with 1,000,000 different tools, and every single time it's going to show up as an inch. Okay. We know from research and from doing the statistics behind it, that the more measurements you take of a thing, the more likely it is you're going to get a false positive or a false negative.
Or some outlier measurement at some point.
Exactly what Rob's talking about. So in our rooms, when we have our microphones and doing things, that if you're like, oh, this is the standard measurement that we take, and this is what we generally look at. You take one measurement, you are much more likely for that one measurement to be accurate than you are if you take 10. You will get 10, and one of them will be wrong.
I see. Okay.
One of them will show you something that is not true, or will be done in a way that is that skews the results, or the measurement tool you're using itself is inappropriate or wrong, or being applied incorrectly or broken in some way. So the more measurements you take, the more likely you are. So when we look at a data set, like to say that, like we looked at this data set of representative data set of the entire United States, and we analyzed it to see if this variable, let's say age, correlates with this other variable, which is I don't know, height or something like that, and we find no correlation. Well, we walk away and we say, well, that's pretty definitive. There's no correlation there. And then age and height, there's no correlation, we'll say. But if we continue to look at that from different angles with different measurement tools and different, and by the measurement tools, I mean different surveys and different, surveying different places. Like, first we ask them, and then we ask the doctors to also measure them, and we ask this. Invariably, you're going to get one that's going to show a correlation where really no correlation exists. And
we humans do like to look for patterns. We will see patterns where no patterns exist sometimes.
And if you've ever been on Facebook, which God help you, but if you've ever been on Facebook or any social media, you will eventually see a graph of patterns. And then it's like, oh, these two things, that will ice cream sales and domestic violence, they hang together, every single time, or blah, blah, blah. And people are like, oh my God, you know what that means? I just saw a story where somebody was like, this guy did this happened to him, and then this other thing happened. And people are like, well, that's why you should never do that first thing.
Correlation is not causation. Yeah.
So the fact that you have a measurement microphone and you're sitting there and you're taking a bunch of different measurements, you're like, oh, I found one that means that shows this. The more measurements you take, the more likely it is you're going to find some sort of erroneous or misleading result. So
something that causes consternation when you've got other probably better evidence that there isn't a reason to have that consternation, such as sounds good to me.
Yes. Infinite Gary is a perfect example where he plays with this stuff so much that invariably he's going to find something that gives him cause for concern.
Sure.
He would be a happier overall audio enthusiast, and I'm not insulting him in any way, shape, or form, if he could just take his first gut reaction or his first measurement, or he set everything up and went, oh, that sounds pretty good, and that was the end of it, that would be the end of it. He would just be happy. But he will invariably take a bunch of different,
lots of comparisons.
He'll keep looking at it until he can find something wrong with it, because you will inevitably find something wrong with it, even if that wrong thing you find is not actually wrong. It's just something that is measuring a little bit weirder than you expected, or is erroneous in its conclusion. So there you go. Toke or Toke?
Toke.
I don't know. Toke. in Denmark. So the folks who are obsessed with hitting full reference cinema full reference volume at home demand having subwoofer setups that can hit 115 dB SPL peaks in their rooms. Mm-hmm. But what about having additional headroom for all of the base managed content that is being rerouted from the other speaker channels? How is that actually managed on a signal level? Some folks have suggested you need an additional 10 dB of headroom available, and that there could potentially be clipping in the base managed signal coming out of the subwoofer pre-outs due to poor signal management. Oh no! Will someone think of the children?
There's a bit of a fundamental misunderstanding that's going on here, but we'll get to that in a second.
You're putting more sound in there, therefore we need more sound. That's how that works. I'll be honest with you. The fact that sound, like, I can understand how a microphone works and how a speaker recreates what a microphone hears. Mm-hmm. What I don't understand is how it gets from one place to the other. Okay. That's the part to me that is a magic box. I don't understand what happens in the wire, I guess.
Oh, okay.
I understand how the diaphragm and the microphone moves in relation to the sound pressure that's in the air. And I understand how the speaker on the other side goes, you did that, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I understand that. Mm-hmm. What I don't understand, but I do understand that, but at the same time, it's magic. As far as I'm concerned, it's magic.
Electricity and electromagnetism, not superly easily understood because it's not visible. You can't see it.
It's so weird. So what would the levels actually be in a full reference volume cinema? Mm-hmm. What sort of signal level is coming out of the pre-outs as a result? And how much headroom do you actually need in order to account for base managed content in addition to a dedicated LFE channel? I think it's 0 is the answer. You need 0
Yeah,
more.
I mean, 115 is solely for the dedicated low-frequency effects channel. That is the only channel in a multi-channel system that can have peaks as high as 115 dB in the signal. So this all relates to what we call decibels full scale. Full scale sets 0 as the absolute loudest possible signal level in this thing, and then everything else is a negative number below that. So the speaker channels in a cinema reference system have a full scale value of 105 decibels. That is the absolute loudest that any individual speaker channel will ever go in a reference volume cinema, and all values are then somewhere lower than that. But the dedicated low frequency effects channel is given a full scale value of 115 decibels, an extra 10 decibels of potential sound pressure level output in only that dedicated low frequency effects channel. So that is well more headroom available from your subwoofer pre-out than you will ever need for any of the other base managed speaker channels. Sure. Now, where the misunderstanding is coming in is if you took two identical sine waves and you're saying, okay, one of these is left channel and one of these is right channel. And now I bring them in and I just combine them, or I can even do that by hand if I wanted to, but I combine them in a program. And now, because they are identical and they perfectly overlap, the amplitude of that signal will go up by 6 decibels. They're just going to overlap, they're going to double up, and the amplitude will go up by 6 dB. And so people are saying, well, if I've got all this bass that is being rerouted from 13 or 15 different speaker channels, some of those have to be identical. Some of those have to overlap and double up, right? So aren't I needing at a minimum 6 decibels extra? Or if it's a true doubling of like decibels, a bell, we've gone up by a full bell instead of a decibel, then don't I need 10 extra decibels, available in headroom because there's this true doubling up. There's got to be doubling up at some point. Well, that's not what is happening. If you have two signals left and right and they're playing the same thing, then yes, if you got two speakers and you co-located them, what you would end up hearing is 6 decibels louder. But that doesn't mean the signal that went to the left channel and the signal that went to the right channel was 6 decibels louder. The signals remained the same. You have 2 different sound sources playing the same signal simultaneously.
Right.
And if they were co-located, what would come out of them would be 6 decibels louder, but the signal between them never changed. So our bass management in our AV receivers, and yes, it does need to be done correctly, but it is smart enough to say what I'm playing back are individual channels. Like, just think of, I now have a full range surround signal. It happens to be going through a series of crossovers so that the deep bass is being played by a separate enclosure, but that is still a single speaker and it's playing at that level. And when all of that bass signal is put in there, it's not that it goes, oh, well, now I've got a single subwoofer pre-out that's playing the bass from 2 different channels and they're identical at this moment, so there's an extra 6 decibels coming out of that single subwoofer. It's like, no, you could play each of them individually, and they would come out at the correct levels, so it's still going to be 105 dB, or there could be a 3 dB increase because your surround left and your surround right are playing exactly the same signal, but they are not co-located at that moment.
Right.
So what you would hear is supposed to be 3 decibels louder. It'll be 3 decibels louder, but it'll be 3 decibels louder within the envelope of 105 was the loudest it was ever going to be. So that doesn't change. But I see where the confusion comes from, because if you just take the signals and add them together as graphs, all of a sudden the amplitude went higher. And you're like, isn't that... No, bass management, thankfully, is a little bit smarter than that, and it keeps the channels separate and plays them back at their appropriate levels.
I think people think, and I think this is totally understandable, because like I said, I don't understand what happens on the wire either. Truly. I think they feel like sound pressure levels like water pressure.
Okay.
Like if you add more water to a hose, the pressure within the hose gets higher, and therefore you need a stronger hose.
Yeah.
So if you're rerouting...
I've been rerouting, water from other channels into this single channel, so doesn't the pressure just go up and up and up? Sure.
But that's not how sound... I mean, it's a signal.
There's a calculation.
Impulse.
There's a calculation that says this is what the signal level was supposed to be from these 7 different sources. So when we reroute it and it all comes out of this one pipe instead, we're going to calculate it so that it comes out at the appropriate level as if we hadn't rerouted it. That's the calculation. And I mean, it does involve a calculation. There have been examples where bass management was done wrong. So, that's the calculations do have to be done correctly. But yeah, the idea is that we are rerouting it and keeping the power the same, not just diverting water and forcing the same amount of water through one pipe instead of 7 now.
Yeah. Juls. Juls has a warehouse approximately 25 meters square. That is not small.
I mean, it's not the biggest warehouse ever, but yeah, it's about 82 feet square.
There's a forklift in there. I mean, it's big. Yeah. I think I'm quite understanding what these looks like holding tanks are.
There's some kind of water scenario going on in here for sure. That is definitely water in concrete tanks.
Like maybe there's fish involved. I feel like
I don't know exactly, but yeah, I mean, this is concrete and cinder block and steel I-beams and what looks like a steel roof. So
not overdamped, in case you're wondering.
This is going to be a reverberant space, one would expect. Yes.
So he was looking to upgrade the sound system in the warehouse, and when he came across a used pair of Monitor Audio Bronze B2 bookshelf speakers on eBay, he went ahead and bought them. They're rated at 6 ohm nominal with 98 dB sensitivity, which is 2.83 volts per 1 meter.
Yeah, so given that 6 ohms nominal, that's a knock it down to about 88 dB if they were 8 ohms, that type of thing. Yeah. Very standard sensitivity.
And 100 watts power handling. He was initially thinking he'd mount them at the midpoints of the 2 side walls of his warehouse, and he just wants to run a 2-channel FM radio and digital audio broadcast, so he's looking at powering them using a Yamaha RN303D stereo receiver that's rated at 100 watts RMS by 2 into 8 ohms with a 0.2% signal to noise ratio, THD. But then you got to think it might be better to have 4 of the Monitor Audio Bronze B2 speakers in each corner of the building for better dispersion of the sound, and he wants to know if the Yamaha could utilize its speakers A and speaker Bs both at the same time to power all 4 of the bookshelf speakers at once, or would he need to get a receiver with more power?
So as I alluded to at the very end of last week's podcast,
not going to get loud enough.
It is. Like I say, the speakers by themselves as bookshelf speakers in a bedroom setup or something, really nice speakers. Like, no criticism of the mono audio speakers, just, in and of themselves, but this is not an appropriate application for them. This is much, much, much too large a space. There is no chance that a single pair of very normal home bookshelf speakers are going to be able to contend with an 82-foot square warehouse. There has to be a completely different scenario. Also,
not only that, it's like kind of outsidey. I mean, there's a lot of water in here.
There's water. There's definitely water going on in this warehouse. Whatever it is that you do in this warehouse, there is water involved. So I would definitely want to be looking at high output, high sensitivity outdoor speakers with a nice bracket type of mount that you'll be able to use. That would be the much more appropriate solution in here. But even then, I wouldn't have just one pair of them. For ideal conditions, I would definitely want multiple pairs. So one that I like to recommend, because they are affordable and they sound good and they perform well, Dayton Audio's, what the heck is it's the IO8 XTW, available in both a black and a white finish. So that's an 8-inch driver in there. They, on Dayton's own website, they list a sensitivity that's lower than what they were measured at. So I don't know if they were being hyper conservative or if they were going by the 70-volt tap, because these can be driven either by a regular AV receiver of about 150 watts per channel, or a 70-volt commercial tap. So maybe they were being conservative and only using that 70-volt tap to list the sensitivity figures, because they've been measured at about 92 dB per watt, 8-ohm nominal load. And yeah, good sensitive output without breaking the bank. They go for about $185 US each. It does seem like he's over in European units, so they go for about 220 euro. That's after the VAT has been applied and everything like that. But as speakers of this sort go, that is really quite affordable, and they're highly rated. Brent Butterworth is a fan of them over at the Wirecutter. He's rated these speakers highly. I'm a fan of them too, and they're a much more suitable application here. They're weatherproof, so they can deal with the humid environment that you've going on in this warehouse. They're more sensitive. They have higher output capability, but even so, I mean, ideally, I suppose, if I want to be able to play quite loud radio, stations, FM stations, digital audio broadcast stations, I might have as many as 5 of them on each sidewall, like basically 20 feet between each of them, type of thing. So each corner and then 3 along the wall.
He could drill these into the freaking I-beams that are going on the top of this thing. And
there's many ways to mount them. They're going to be much easier to mount. But yeah, I would have, certainly at least 4. I would want 6 or 8, or like I say, ideally maybe even 10. But maybe this is just for, relatively quiet background music that's going on.
How are they going to hear it over the
water and stuff like that? Yeah.
Well, not just the water. They got forklifts in there.
Making quiet noise, and it's going to be echoing in here, all kinds of stuff. So absolutely, no matter what you get, you're going to need more than 2.
Yes.
4 would be
4 is really
absolute minimum. Yeah. Like I say, probably
in the middle
10
of this room, you're
nice.
not going to hear anything with 4, I think.
To drive all of that, I would like to get probably just, one of Dayton's own. Let's keep the same brand distribution amplifiers. They have the nice distribution amplifiers, 6 pairs. Those distribution amplifiers can drive, so they'd be a completely reasonable choice. You can connect it up to whatever radio tuner you want. That doesn't have to be expensive at all, because you're not sending different sources to different pairs of speakers in this scenario. They're all playing the same thing, so you can do this at a pretty reasonable price, but obviously not as inexpensive as like a used pair of monitor audio speakers off of eBay and a used Yamaha receiver. It is going to be more than that for something that we would say is appropriate. So look, that's a bit of raining on your parade. That's a bit of saying spend more money than you wanted to at first. But we just can't feel good about saying, oh yeah, just get a 150 watt stereo receiver instead of a 100 watt stereo receiver and have 4 monitor audio bookshelf speakers, and it's going to be A-okay in this warehouse. Like, no, we just can't feel good about saying that. You might have wanted to hear that as the advice, but we're just like, no, it wouldn't be appropriate. So yeah, some good Dayton outdoor speakers, a Dayton distribution amp, and your choice of a FM tuner and digital audio broadcast source.
There's a 12-channel Dayton distribution amp.
Yeah.
That's 60 watts per channel.
Yeah.
How much is it? How come it doesn't have a price on here?
Oh, Dayton doesn't list prices because they go by their distributors. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one I think usually goes for about $700 US. It's not terrible. Yeah.
Right. But if you want to get sound of something that big, you're going to have to spend more than $50 on a used pair of speakers and about that on a used stereo
But
receiver.
I mean, if you want to look for some 8-inch used outdoor speakers, because there's going to be people selling those will be around. Like the Yamahas are very good, very reliable. So if you find some Yamaha outdoor speakers, I definitely want the larger, the 8-inch driver ones. But those are, they were very, very popular. Somebody's going to be selling some used 8-inch Yamaha outdoor speakers. Like that would be the much more appropriate choice here.
Karl received a pair of curved OLED computer monitors that we suggested to him a little while ago, and they seem to be doing the trick, so he says thanks.
You're welcome.
He has also reached the end of his Kaleidoscape Strato S with a failed hard drive journey, in addition to the $600 worth of movie credits that he already received when he couldn't wait. He went ahead and bought a new Strato V player and replaced the Strato S Kaleidoscape. Did I say Kaleidoscape the first time? I don't know what I said. And his dealer worked together, and his dealer has issued him 20% of the Strato S's original purchase price in store credit. It does not have to be spent on the Kaleidoscape gear. It can go towards anything he buys from a dealer. So that's that. Yeah. So now to his question this week. In his office on campus, he uses a Mac Mini, and he'd like to improve the sound quality in his office by adding a pair of wireless bookshelf speakers. Mm-hmm. So, what do we say are the best pair of wireless bookshelf speakers to get, and why are they the KEF LS50 Wireless 2 that he already is leaning towards while they're on sale for $2,000 a pair? Okay. So let me just say this before we go too far. The KEFs are great, and if you got those, problems I don't think you'd be disappointed by their sound quality. That is the perfect scenario in which to use them. Office setup, you want wireless. They have an HDMI input on them. So, even if you had some source that was HDMI ARC, you can do that on the KEF Wireless too. They are the Meta version. They don't have Meta in the name for some reason, even though they loved putting that in all the names of everything else they made. But the Wireless 2 does have the Meta drivers. So, yeah. I will say, as somebody who's been using wireless Bluetooth speakers for a while in my life, what are you going to do with them? Okay. Because this makes a huge difference. If the idea that I want there to be sounds, I want to be able to hear them, I don't want to run wires, I listen to music in my office and stuff like that, great. Go with God, buy whatever the heck you want. Rob's going to have some suggestions for cheaper stuff. Yeah. But I will say that if you are going to be watching video content, lip sync is an issue with all these wireless speakers.
Well, you can usually Bluetooth work it out. Only, because these have other wireless connection methods as well, including AirPlay. So so you can work it out, and even with Bluetooth you can work it out. I watch Netflix. I mean, I'm watching a lot of stuff right now, and many times I find that the lip sync will get off, and I have to stop the video or rewind it, you go back button skip
a
little bit,
and that will usually fix it, but not always. So just be aware. And plus, the LS50 Wireless 2 active speakers are $17.99 on accessories for less. In case you're wondering.
That's B stock. You can bring the price down a little bit
and
more.
And the LSX2 powered speakers are $1,000.
Yeah. Those are the smaller driver, less output, less bass extension.
You're in an office.
Yeah. Exactly. For a desktop setup, the LSX2 might be a very good choice as well. This is probably less for Karl and more for everybody else because, Karl, we know, can afford this stuff. And if you're leaning towards the LS50 Wireless 2, I don't have any particular reason other than there are less expensive options out there, but I don't have any sound quality reason. As if you like the aesthetics, they're a nice aesthetic choice because they don't, not much else looks like those KEF LS50 speakers either. So if you like them, absolutely. I have no reason to steer you away. But if you just wanted to consider something less expensive, SVS does have their Prime Wireless Pro speakers that they sell for $900 a pair, so less than half the price of even the sale price of the LS50 Wireless 2. Very, very nice speakers, those SVS Prime Wireless Pro speakers. Not small, They're not teeny tiny. They're pretty sizable, but so are the LS50 wireless too, as far as desktop speakers go. And then, one of my favorites right now is Kanto's REN speakers, REN speakers. These are the ones that do have the HDMI input, because I was like, I want, feature parity, AirPlay 2 support, HDMI input on the back of them, and $600 a pair for the Kanto REN, and they come in a lovely variety of different colors. So, if you want those looks, they're considerably less expensive than the Kefs while sounding really good, have lovely color choices, and $600 a pair. Pretty darn affordable for ones that have HDMI input on them as well. So there you go.
Infinite Gary. Gary had some professional video calibrations performed on some of his displays not that long ago. The same calibrator used the same equipment and the same software to calibrate both his older, at this point, Runco Q750D projector, which is a single chip DLP with RGB LEDs as the light source, and his much newer OLED. As we've detailed several times now, Gary has lowered the OLED light setting more than most people, since even the 100 nit peak standard for SDR tends to bother his eyes, and he simply prefers a dimmer image. But even after all that, he noticed while watching a recent hockey game and seeing the same game on both displays that the colors of the uniforms not look identical. And he thought the projector had the uniform colors looking more real life, while the OLED rendition looked a little less accurate. Can we elaborate on whether that is something inherent to projection versus flat panel display technology? Or is it maybe just a case that this projector allows for a more precise calibration, or that you went and lowered the backlight and therefore changed the color saturation?
Or I think more likely than all of that, the room's lighting. These were different rooms. Wasn't the same room at the same time with the same lighting. Your eye can be very roughly and not terribly accurately, but good enough for an analogy, considered kind of a photon bucket. And basically, if your room's lighting has more red in it than another room, then the red photon bucket of your eyes is going to fill up a little bit from the ambient light having more red in it, and your perception of red from the television screen, even though the TV and the projector might be outputting exactly the same shade of red, you will perceive it as slightly different doing that comparison if the ambient lighting in the rest of the room is different. If it has more or less red in the ambient lighting, your perception of the red color coming from your display will change. That's why we talk about, in a critical situation, having a neutral gray as your walls, or a complete and utter black, so that you don't have that skewing of the perception of your colors if there is any visible light, ambient light, in the room. So that's where that comes into play. It's why I loathe the Philips Ambilight thing, where it either is a disco ball behind your screen, which is ridiculous, or it mimics the colors that are on screen with the backlight, right? So if the screen, the scene that you're watching is predominantly blue, it'll throw a blue backlight behind the screen. I loathe that because it skews your perception of the color on screen when the lighting behind the screen is constantly changing. I really, really dislike that. Some people like the effect, and that's fine. It's their money and it's their experience, but that's something that I would actively avoid and try to get away from. So that's most likely what's going on there. But the other part of it is our perception of the shade of a color absolutely does change with the luminosity of that same color. That's something Dolby has worked a lot on with their perceptual quantizer and their perceptual graphing of colors, because as a color gets brighter, we tend to perceive it as being less saturated. Even though if you measure it, the saturation of the color might be exactly the same, there's that third dimension of it, which is how bright is it, and our perception of it changes. So even though you've lowered the OLED light setting, in his case, his projector is putting out less than 50 nits peak. It's dimmer than projector is, quote unquote, supposed to be. Instead of being 100 nits peak, projectors are supposed to be 50 nits peak, but his is even lower than that. It's closer to 35, 40. And then his OLED is going to be, 80 to 90, maybe a little below 100, but still double the luminosity of the projector that he's watching. So that's going to change your perception of the colors a little bit too. So what's the real holdup when it comes to live sports in 4K? All of the streaming services offer
plenty of movies in 4K with HDR, but a lot of those same streaming services only stream live sports in 1080p, or they'll say it's 4K, but it's actually upscaled 1080p, and the same is true of a lot of cable TV and next-gen TV broadcasts. The cameras exist. There are some 4K HDR live sports broadcasts, so we know the trucks and the production chains can do it. What's the holdup? Why isn't it commonplace yet? There's a lot of expense that goes into all that equipment and everything else.
Money is the reason why.
That they're not going to spend just because some people can watch it in 4K. Even the people that have 4K displays that are streaming in 4K, that is a huge difference. I mean, there's buffering involved. That's a huge difference than what is live broadcast in 4K, and having the bandwidth to be able to get it to all those people all over everywhere. You know, there's still people in the United States that are on dial-up. Let's be honest.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I mean it's a ROI calculation, right? You know, if they are tracking, you know, when they broadcast the Super Bowl, which they didn't do in 4K resolution, they did it in HDR, but it was upscaled, you know. But when they do that, they are tracking what the viewership is like. They are definitely tracking what devices people are watching it on, and they're looking at, okay, we lay out this money for improved signal quality. Is there a return on investment in any way on that? And by and large, I think the data is suggesting quite broadly that consumers will choose lower price over higher resolution and even HDR every time. Obviously not every individual. There are those of us who will pay the extra money, but that's why all of the streaming services you want 4K and HDR and Atmos, it's only going to be in the most expensive tier. We're not going to bother putting that in the standard tier anymore, because the majority of people would rather pay the lower price, and they are not going to unsubscribe from us for not having 4K and not having HDR and not having Atmos. The majority of people don't care. So that's where the ROI simply isn't there right now.
Yeah. RAF in Australia. Plus, let's be honest, Gary, you're going to complain about it anyways. They'd put it in there for you, and then you'd write them and tell them it's not good.
The colors don't look right on his Runco projector that can't do HDR anymore. That's going to be even worse.
Right. Raf in Australia. Raf wrote us recently to ask whether it'd be worth adding SVS sound path isolation feed under his pair of dual 15-inch driver Tone Winner SWD 8000 subs. He doesn't have any update on that front for us yet, but he heard us mention a couple times recently how when people ask us about getting bigger subs, what they really want is more gut punch, tactile, hit you in the chest base, and people mistakenly think it's all about getting bigger subs and lower output below 20 hertz. At least according to us. Well, that got him wondering about his own setup, because he has been craving more punch, even though he has a pair of massive, high output, dual opposed 15-inch driver subwoofers in his medium-sized room. So could it be that all he needs is a bit of a hump from 40 to 60 hertz? Well, he went back and took that before graph that Odyssey had measured, and wouldn't you know it, there's about a 7 or 8 dB dip centered right at 50 hertz, at least according to Odyssey's measurement before applying correction. Now, according to his Odyssey's own after graph, which is not a graph that is from a real measurement, is what they anticipate there being. It supposedly has turned a 7 or 8 dB native base response, or
plus or minus. Yeah, there was some humps down around 35 hertz. There's this dip right at 50 hertz.
Yeah. After measurement, to ruler flat. But never actually took an after measurement to confirm. So was that actually just him? So that's actually just what it's aiming for, right? Not necessarily what it achieved. Absolutely. And that is correct. Yeah. That is what they think is going to happen. Regardless, he wasn't ready to go through all of Odyssey again just yet, but he wanted to see if he could maybe bump up that 60 to 40 hertz region a bit, just to see if we were actually right about that being a real solution to wanting bigger subs. So those Tone Winner subs have an app, and you can set your own parametric EQ filters for each sub, similar to SVS. So he went ahead and added the same 3 dB increase centered at 50 hertz with a Q value of 3.0 to both of his Tone Winner subs. And we've got a little graph here that you can see what he did. You can see the Q factor there, which is with the 3.0 is that creates the width.
Yeah, that's how pointy or how speed bump hilly that thing is. So the plus and minus to either side of 50 hertz, how much it's affecting.
So before he draws any conclusions, he wants to know, is this the correct way to go about things? Do we have any suggestions for how he should introduce this 40 to 60 hertz bump in a setup if this isn't the right way to do it? I mean, you can do it from Odyssey's editor app, or you can do it
but
here.
that would require rerunning Odyssey again if you hadn't already run the app previously. If you ran your Odyssey calibration in the app originally, then you can afterwards go back in and change your target curve manually, and it will still be able to reuse the measurements it took originally. But if you ran it from the AV receiver directly, then that would mean rerunning Odyssey all over again. So this is a completely acceptable way. If your subwoofers have EQ built into them themselves, this is absolutely a perfectly fine way, especially as a trial run, to put in a 40 to 60 hertz bump up. But of course, the thing is, in that before measurement that Odyssey took, we don't know whether that was an actual cancellation centered at 50 hertz or just a destructive interference, but not an actual room mode where there's full-on cancellation. Because yes, it is aiming for that ruler flat graph in the afterwards, but not necessarily hitting it. It is not taking an actual after measurement to confirm. So if you're one day going to have a whole bunch of time and want to get into the super nitty gritty of it, that's where people measure what is actually going on after Odyssey has run with something like Room EQ Wizard and a UMic 1, and you might discover that there is still a dip at 50 hertz even after Odyssey did its thing, because if that's a full-on room mode, then no amount of boosting the signal level is going to fill that in. It's going to target filling it in, but it might not be able to achieve it. And if that's the case, then even putting in the parametric EQ bump in the subwoofers themselves is also not going to actually raise the output level centered at 50 hertz there, because no matter how loud you make it, if you make it that loud in both subs, they are canceling each other out because of the interaction in the room. So we don't know that for sure, because sometimes it's a bit of destructive interference that's showing the dip in the graph, but it's not a full-on room mode, so you can fill it in with EQ to some extent, if that's the case, but we don't know for sure. So there'll be a time when you might want to confirm with Room EQ Wizard. So if you do this experiment, what we're saying is, I know it sounds self-serving, but if you're like, I put in this hump and it still doesn't give me extra gut punch, it's like, well, Tom and Rob still might not be wrong. It might be that you actually have a room mode at 50 hertz, and no matter how much you increase that hump at 50 hertz, it's still going to cancel out, and you're not going to hear or feel the effect. In which case, physically moving your subwoofers is going to be the only, physically moving at least one of them is going to be the only solution. You're going to have to find a physical means of avoiding that room mode so that then you can EQ and put in the hump.
You could also put in some sort of targeted, resonator that will,
I suppose,
absorb 50
which
hertz,
is kind of like putting another passive subwoofer into your room.
So what you could do, and again, if you don't, you're like, I don't want to do this Room EQ Wizard thing, it sounds like too much work. What you could do is just you put this EQ on your subs, right? The 3 dB, or maybe you decide to go even higher, and you're like, I still don't
I mean, in fact, if I'm testing this out, I would probably start higher. I would probably start at 6 or 8, and then if it's overblown, it's easy to pull back down. But if you're just wanting to notice,
but you want to know that you're you don't want there to be like, well, I don't know, 3 dB is not that much. But what you could do is you can now run Odyssey again. Now you're gonna at some point you're gonna run it anyways. So maybe you can run it again, and then you would see the before graph, which would include
if it has gone up
the EQ. And if you still see a suck out there, you're like, it's a room mode. I need to move my sub.
And you can also just listen to a sweep, right? If you're listening to a sweep, and no matter what you do, when it gets to the between 40 and 60 hertz range, and particularly at 50 hertz, you hear it go, dee. It's like it just drops out for a bit there. It's like, that's just a cancellation, and no amount of EQ is going to be able to fix that.
Doesn't GIC have targeted panels?
Yeah, the Scopist tuned bass traps.
Yeah, so that's what you would look for.
It's easier to move your sub.
You're like, I can't put. I mean, it's going to be massive.
They're almost the size of another subwoofer anyway.
Yes.
And almost as expensive.
That's right. So if you got something like that, that would be targeted at 50 hertz. As an example, because that's where you're seeing it, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't move these subs, but I can maybe put up another panel someplace in this place. Then you could do that. So these are all options for you to kind of figure this out. And I like Rob's option of just like putting a massive bass hump there, bass boost there in the frequency, and then listening to some sweeps with it on and off.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't
That'll
sound any
tell
different,
you right
then
quick if it's a room mode.
Yeah. John Awfully.
No, John
he's
from.
John from Awfully. Oh, sorry. I didn't see the from word. It's in Ireland, apparently.
Yes,
Awfully. Right. Awfully. Looks like offal, which is means the innards of an animal. The organ meat, the stuff that people generally don't eat except if you're from a place that does. And I guess we do here a little bit. Like liver's a thing that we eat here.
Definitely. Kidney.
We don't here in the States that I know of eat a lot of kidney. We eat kidney beans, but I'm pretty sure those aren't from an animal. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure because I don't eat those either. First up, John wanted to say thanks for the work we put into podcasts and for enjoyment and the smiles it brings him. He's all for us sharing our opinions beyond what just home theater and our pronunciation of Slancha.
Health.
Was perfectly fine.
It's a cheers. Health.
Okay. Slancha.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says it was perfectly fine. So we're doing all right in his book.
Hooray.
Except for me, who just immediately messed up the word. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks to listening to us. He's upgraded his TV to an 85-inch TCL and replaced his old Pioneer receiver with a Denon X1800H. He's now examining his speakers and a pair of subwoofers. And he's had several questions on those topics. So, that's a puppy. Sometimes there's dogs and they look small, but sometimes they're dogs that are actual puppies. That's a puppy.
Okay.
He's very cute.
Tom's window is open.
It's open. I'm getting some light in here. All right. He's running a 7.2 configuration at the moment. His center speaker is a Heybrook HBC1 that's apparently well thought of, although he didn't even know that when he bought it. The rest of his speakers are from a German brand, Cat, which is, I guess, not the same California audio technology.
No, not California. Nope.
Those massive, stupid speakers that cost $150 million. Anyways, they are the LEB401 model, which is either a short floor stand or a tall stand mount. He's chosen to put all 6 of his on short stands to get their tweeters up to ear height. I see. Yeah, that's a weird size speaker.
Yeah, it's an awkward one.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely low if it's sitting on the floor, but then it is unusually large if it's on a stand. Yeah.
The Australian speakers I reviewed many, many years ago were the same sort of deal. Right. You're like, geez, why is this freaking tweeter so small? And then I moved to Australia, and most of the furniture there is very Scandinavian design. Sure. I mean, it's like so close to the ground. You're like, geez, I might as well just sit on the ground at this point. So maybe that's what it's got to do with. I don't know. Yeah. Or maybe it's just a style.
Yep.
I don't know. Even though all 6 speakers are identical after running Odyssey, the crossover frequency that was automatically set for his front versus surround back speakers are substantially different. So for the fronts were 110, center was 80, surround was 80, surround back was 250 hertz. Surround back was 250 hertz. That's crazy. He did replace his old couch with a new soft plush couch that seems to have helped in letting him play everything louder without it sounding uncomfortable. And then he also recently bought a pair of Edifier P12 speakers that he put in his kitchen. And listening to those, he's thinking that all of his speakers could maybe use an upgrade to give him a significantly better sound quality. Being in Ireland, a lot of the speaker brands we frequently mention aren't so easy to get a hold of. He doesn't have a fixed budget yet per se, but he definitely want to keep the cost down. So in terms of what he's been able to find locally, he's considering either the Polk Audio Monitor series or the ELAC Debut 2.0 series, which is cheaper now that the Debut 3.0 series has come out. Mm-hmm. Do we have any opinions on which speakers he should buy and whether he should actually upgrade his speakers at all, and whether he should stick with floor-standing speakers all around or switch to bookshelf models? So we're not seeing the room.
Not exactly. I mean, we got some reflections in his television screen.
Yeah, I can see the couch.
It's not like looking like he's miles away from these speakers.
No.
It does. I mean, it looked like a fairly standard living room type of size. We're definitely taking
How is he not
guesses
getting
there.
a speaker short though with that speaker wire connection? You see this
I
thing
know.
back
Yeah,
here?
there's some little strays that are looking like they're gonna a little
I
arc
don't
is gonna
understand
make
why
its way across.
my receiver keeps going into protection mode. Anyways, not you. You're fine. Settle down. Yeah, bookshelf models all around is the way to go here. I think there's no reason not to.
I'm not seeing anything here where I'm like, oh, that clearly looks like we're in 30 by 40 foot space, and you're gonna have much higher output speakers. No, it looks like bookshelf scenario for sure. Yeah.
I mean, but like we've almost universally found in people who contact us from other countries, and I mean many people in the United States here as well, but all of our listeners from other countries who have called in and said, "Well, how can I get better speaker quality?" The answer is room treatments. Okay,
but I mean, at the same time, like all of these speakers are significantly older. The chances that so out of the ones that you mentioned, like the ELAC Debut 2.0, can you get a hold of maybe just a pair? Right? Just one pair, bookshelf speakers, ELAC Debut 2.0, maybe somewhere that will let you return them if you really don't like them. Like, to me, that's well worth an audition because that'll tell you pretty quickly, and I think you'll be able to tell very easily and quickly, and you'll be like, oh yeah, these are a whole lot better, and I like them, and this is going to be worth my while. Or no, it turns out that the room, versus the speakers I just added to my kitchen, the room is making the bigger difference here. These ELAC Debut 2.0 speakers don't sound super different from the speakers I'm already using, so it's not going to be worth my while to replace all 7. Yeah. Like, this is definitely worth an audition. And yeah, out of the ones you mentioned, I would lean towards those ELAC Debut 2.0. They're very good speakers, very neutral talent like it is speakers.
The big comfy couch, which is clearly it looks like it might be an L-shaped. It's hard to tell.
Kind of looks L-shaped.
But I mean, there's hardwood floors or something hard on the floor. There's nothing else in here that can absorb sound. So if you can, I mean, that will make more of a difference overall than anything else.
I mean, speakers do make a big difference. If you have speakers that are themselves not fully accurate or are missing entire ranges of frequencies, like
who knows with these
we talk
speakers,
about
though.
The room being very important, and it is, but the speakers are very important, and they are like 50-50 split, 60-40 split speakers versus room, something like that. Like the speakers are a very significant part of what you're hearing.
If they're not making the sound, then or if they're making a bad sound, there's nothing you can do but upgrade your speakers. So, and I don't know anything about these speakers, these cat speakers.
No. I mean, just the design of them, the age of them, all of that leads me to believe like it probably is possible to get better speakers. Yes. So to me, yes, audition. This is definitely an audition situation.
And you're not looking at extremely expensive speakers.
Right.
I would lean towards the debuts over the ELACs over the Polk myself. Yeah.
Like some of the Polk's a little bit higher end, I'm quite a fan of, but the monitor series is I take the ELACs over the monitor series, basically.
Yes, I think so too. That's it. If you can return both of them, get them both.
Yeah,
get them both.
Heck yeah.
We don't know what's going to sound good in your room as it's set up. Yeah. It could very well be that the Polks to your ear sound better. In which case,
I mean, if you had come to us and said, "I bought a bunch of ELAC speakers, like, should I return them?" Like, no, those are good speakers. I'd be happy getting those. Yeah.
What is up with the crossover frequencies that LSE set? Why would they be so different when all the speakers are identical? Will the same thing happen if you upgrade to new speakers? Well, we won't know what will happen if you upgrade to new speakers. This is probably a room interaction more than anything else.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And where you place that microphone. I wonder if that microphone was being blocked by your couch, and that's why the rear
on a couch
surround
cushion?
backs are so high. The surround backs are rolling off so high because there was no bass getting to them.
It could
through
also
the couch.
Be the sort of opposite scenario, which is the automatic setting of the crossovers. It's basically looking for the point where there's a clear roll off. And so if there's actually an artificial boost at frequencies higher, which could be the case in your surround back speakers, right? Maybe they're right in the corners of the room or something we can't really see, but there could be there could be like an actual artificial boost, say at 500 hertz. And so then it's noticing, by 250, it's 8 decibels quieter than it was at 500. These speakers must be rolling off up at 300 hertz or so, and it sets a really high crossover frequency. So that could definitely be a bit of an anomaly that's going on there. So the other thing is, who knows? Maybe you've got a bass woofer that's broken in one of the towers in the surround backs or something like that. With speakers of this age, there could be just a woofer that isn't working anymore or something like that. That's possible as well. But no, I wouldn't anticipate that with new speakers that this is like a foregone conclusion. I think with a little adjustment in placement and microphone positioning, you'll have results that are more what you expect.
So he has a mismatched pair of subwoofers at the front of his setup. Just to the left of the TV stand, he has a Cambridge Audio Aero 9, which is uses a 10-inch driver plus a 10-inch passive radiator driven by a 500-watt amp. Diagonally across from that, in the rear right corner of his room, is a Yamaha SW205, which is a servo-controlled 8-inch driver powered by a 150-watt amp. These are not equivalent subwoofers, in case you're wondering.
No. Yeah, there'd be differences there.
Yeah. After I think the Cambridge Audio is rated down to 21, which seems very optimistic.
That's
but
optimistic,
maybe
it's
doable, and if you shove it in the closet or something.
I mean, it didn't actually say minus 3 dB. Just the frequency.
It just
range.
says it'll make something.
There's
happen
movement
at 21.
there, detectable
There's
movement. Yeah.
After getting his new Denon X1800H receiver, he's been playing more music, and he's been playing it louder than he used to. And the Aero 9 subwoofer at the front of the room has been making some unpleasant noises. He thinks it's called chuffing. Is that correct?
That seems
shouldn't be
unlikely with a passive radiator sub. Chuffing, it comes from the port. It's actual air turbulence, and so you don't have. I mean, it's not genuinely a sealed subwoofer because there is basically a movable wall of this subwoofer, so it's not sealed. But that passive radiator should not be producing chuffing sound. Now, that
specifically says on the technical specifications that the passive radiator replaces base ports to eliminate port air noise at high levels.
Right.
Which is exactly what you're saying it is.
But this is a case of you're hearing a noise. I believe you. I believe that you are hearing a noise. It's just the actual word for it would not be chuffing, but you are hearing that noise, which could be a number of things. I mean, it could be that there is actually there can be like a little air leak, like sometimes the seal around either the driver itself or around the passive radiator. Over time, if these were older, if that's a foam seal, that can sort of dry out, crack, form a little hole in it. Normally, that wouldn't give you a chuffing sound because it'd be like a whistling or a wheezing type of sound. But there could, what I'm saying is some part of the actual moving part, the driver or the passive radiator, could be not moving the way it's supposed to anymore, not perfectly linearly. It's possible. I don't know what the situation is, but like that passive radiator, it can move quite a bit. And he will mention in a moment, it's just sitting on top of a rug. I'm like, it could actually be physically knocking into something. That could be the noise that you're hearing.
I would think that if it were moving that much, you would hear a clang.
Yeah,
you would hear it bottom out.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I have no doubt that it's making noise. But so yeah, technically the word in this case would not be chuffing because it's not air turbulence. But yes, something is not quite right.
So subwoofers are sitting on top of rugs. That's better than having them directly on the wood floor, right?
Yes.
I mean, generally speaking, yes. So aside from putting something underneath them, is there something you can do to resolve that chuffing noise? The crazy thing is, when you watch Pacific Rim at close reference volume, there was no chuffing noise, so he's a bit confused as to what's really going on. Mm-hmm. He used to always leave the subwoofers on at all times, but now that he set them to auto, so they power on automatically when they sense a signal, and they go into standby after detecting no signal for several minutes. Could that have something or anything to do with the chuffing noise? Do they need to warm up or something? So no.
It's definitely not that last part.
It's
absolutely
not the last one.
Like, I'm wondering if there actually is some distortion going on from that 250 hertz crossover that got set, because that is higher than the range than that subwoofer is spec'd to play. There's nothing wrong with, in the case of those surround back speakers, you can manually lower that crossover. Like, I know how we always say, if it sets it to lower than 80 hertz, we'll manually raise it to 80. If it sets it higher than 80, we'll probably leave it alone. But like, this is a case where 250 hertz is out of place. Something isn't quite right with that. These speakers.
I would probably go around and put all these down to 80, to be honest.
Or maybe like 100 or something.
100. You could do 110, but these subwoofers are not supposed to be playing up to 250.
Because I mean, like the bass in
they're going to
Pacific,
be playing higher than that.
Yeah,
too.
the bass in Pacific Rim is low. It's low, rumbly bass. So it sounds like the subwoofer itself is okay. This sounds like it's trying to play certain frequencies that sub just really isn't capable of playing. And I am wondering if that particularly high 250 hertz crossover.
I wonder
is part of this.
what listening mode he's using for music as well.
There's
Because if he's using like anything that's a matrixing out the two channel for his surrounds and surround backs, that would support your theory that it's the 250 crossover that's doing it. And also why you would not hear it in Pacific Rim, because Pacific Rim's going to have an LFE channel that's dedicated to just the low stuff. And there's not going to be that much information in the surround and surround backs below 250 hertz to even route there, and it won't be that loud anyways. So, but with music, it would be going all the time.
That's right.
If he used some sort of matrixing, Dolby Digital or Dolby Surround and DTS:X.
Yeah, I think the subwoofer, the driver itself, is trying to play sounds that it isn't quite capable of playing. Yeah, because it's not.
Yeah,
it's
and
not
you need to make it
turbulent.
stop because you're going to break something.
Yeah.
Very quickly, because that's what that sound is. If it were just air going in and out, I would still be concerned about it, but I would be less concerned about it. The fact that you're getting noise, and don't discount the fact that you are placing the noise in the front subwoofer because you can see it, and that's where you think it's coming from. It could actually be coming from a different.
It could be coming
source.
from the Yamaha. Yeah, it's very tough to tell with bass. We're not good at picking out direction.
And so I would definitely go up to the sub because
just try them
speaker.
one at a time. Like just turn one of them off, leave the other one on, and find out for sure that it's the front one.
Yeah. Some diagrams show the subwoofer's place right in the corner of the room. Would that help him and give him better bass? I don't know if it's going to give you better bass, but there's room reinforcements that happen when you put
it
the
does add
subwoofers
some reinforcement. The lower you go, the more the room sort of reinforces it when the subwoofer is right into the corner of the room. It's okay to try it. At least you do have subs front and back and not just both in the front corners or something like that.
I see a door. Okay, well, let me just go to the next question here. So our top recommended RSL speed woofers aren't easy to get in Ireland. Do we have any other suggestions for him? Would it maybe be worth moving the Aero 9 to the back of the room and only getting a new sub for the front? Well, I guess it would depend on what subwoofer you got. So I see a door that lets you into this room, but it's kind of blocked by the TV, so I'm not really sure what's going on there.
He did say that things are actually on wheels in this setup, so I guess that's a not often used door, but if they have to use it, they can kind of get that front right speaker out of the way. The stand has wheels on it.
So that's going to be making some noise too. So, behind him in the reflection of the TV, I can't really tell if it's open. It might be open on like one of the sides to other parts of the space. So, if this is an enclosed space, it looks to be very small. In which case, the Cambridge Audio might be just fine for this. But it depends on what you pair it with.
What
just
is
remember
the new
that,
sub?
Yeah, anything that you pair it with is going to be by itself below a certain frequency, and you're down to us, and I don't know what that frequency is with this Cambridge Audio. I know it's not 21.
Right.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah. So over in that section of the world, BK Electronics is probably where I'm going to point you. And it ideally one of their 12-inch models, although they do have a little bit smaller, a little bit more affordable 10-inch models that are quite good too. But ideally probably one of the 12-inch models if you want to be getting right down to 20 hertz, which we like to be able to do. But obviously size and price are considerations too. Now they are UK based. Their prices are in British pounds. So Ireland is not part of the UK unless he would have said Northern Ireland if he was Northern Ireland. So Ireland's not part of the UK. But usually it's not too problematic shipping between UK and Ireland. Usually that's doable, easier than having it shipped from the United States, for example. So that's that part of the world I typically point you to BK Electronics, and I'm sure you'll find a model that is up your alley there because their prices are not ridiculous. Their prices are really quite reasonable and good performing, especially their 12-inch sub models.
Yeah, they have one called the Double Gem, which I'm looking at right now, which has two drivers. I don't know what the sizes are. And it's in front of your room, minus 3 dB, lower than 20 hertz. Why does it have to be in front?
That's some weird stuff.
That's a weird thing.
Regardless of what's written in their marketing, the subwoofers themselves perform very nicely.
Yeah, interesting. I'd be interested to hear what these subs sound like. Christian is trying to find something that he can suggest to one of his friends. They've got a 46-inch TV in a TV stand that with shelves on either side, so they have an entertainment unit. They have zero interest in adding traditional-looking speakers, but they do want something that sounds better than their built-in TV speakers. The obvious answer would be a soundbar, right? But even those don't quite appeal in terms of looks. Christian's friend either wants something invisible or actually pretty to look at. What can we suggest? There's about 45 inches across either above or below the TV where some sort of 2.0 or 3.0 bar could go. But it's got to be a bar. It's got to be a bar.
Well, no, he's just assuming like what other solution could there really be if they're like regular looking speakers? Nowhere. Nope, not gonna have them.
I would go with something like Orb Audio's, those round metal balls. I don't particularly. I mean, they sound okay. I think they're going to sound better than this.
Yeah, they're going to sound better than the built-in speakers of a 46-inch flat panel. Yep.
Yeah, but he's got a bunch of crap in this thing already, and it clearly doesn't want to move any of it.
Yeah.
But in the top left, there is something roundish in there, which might be a bottle of liquor or something. So, honestly, and I'm going to say this, and you people are all going to hate me, even if they aren't equidistant to, and even if they like placed them in weird places on some of the stuff, it's not going to matter. We're really going for just sound, and mono, even though it might be 2.0 or whatever, it's still going to sound better than the TV speakers, no matter where they place them.
My hang up there, though, is, and I'm going to make a suggestion that has this foible too. Are these people who are going to deal with a receiver of any sort to power said speakers? Because just to go for it, one of the bar-shaped units that I do like to recommend in scenarios like these is from KEF, their HTF 8003. This is a passive speaker bar. So there are three speakers built into it, so left, center, right, all into one physical bar that I think is aesthetically pleasing. It's kind of glossy and rounded, and it looks quite sleek and nice. It's not literally invisible, either above or below the TV, but I don't know too many people who outright object to the aesthetics of it. It does physically fit, but it's $950, and then you also need an AV receiver to power it, and that really has me questioning if they'll honestly go for that solution. So I am thinking that a Sonos soundbar here is maybe the most likely thing for them to go for. Now, the thing is, if it's not going to have a subwoofer anywhere in sight, I would kind of ideally point you to the newest Arc Ultra, which is $1,000, so price might be a consideration. But also, it's potentially a little bit too wide to fit into the space that you have available, because it's close to 48 inches in width. And I think he said about 45 inches in width there, so it might not physically fit. Now, there is the older Sonos Arc that the Arc Ultra is basically replacing. That is good news because the Arc is on sale for $650 now instead of its old price of $900. And Sonos doesn't go on sale very often. The thing is, the Arc by itself is kind of bass shy, but then compared to built-in TV speakers, it has a little bit more bass extension than built-in TV speakers, so it's not like they're going to be a downgrade. It's just for what we're considering for home cinema, we'd call them a little bit bass shy, but compared to what they're coming from, it's still going to be an improvement all the way around. And that way you don't need an AV receiver, and it's Sonos. And yeah, that's kind of the way I'm leading here is the older Arc, Sonos Arc, going on sale clearance right now for $650.
Couldn't they just get something like a Fosse amp, set its volume to max, and then control the volume with the TV remote?
Yeah.
That would power either the Orb Audios that I suggested or the soundbar that Rob suggested.
Although then, if you're just doing a Fosse amp, then you're kind of leaving the center speaker out of it, so it kind of wouldn't be worth getting the KEF at that point at the price that they charge for it, because that is a left, center, right. But yeah, if you're just doing like a pair of the Orb Audio speakers and then a Fosse amplifier that can be hidden behind the TV very easily, yeah, I could go for that for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction I'm leaning myself, but they may hate it, so what do I know? David, how long of is this podcast?
Oh, we're well past 2 hours now. We're 2 hours, 10 minutes here. So
I've got things to do, though.
Okay, yeah. Well, David, you heard your name mentioned. You are on the list. Dazz, you are on the list as well, and I think that was everything I wrote up for this week. So David and Dazz, first up next week.
All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Raf for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 130 patrons over at patreon.com.
That is right, Raf. Thank you very much for that PayPal donation. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, minimum of $1 a month. And very big thanks to our 130 patrons over there.
And we want to thank those for sending in notes of gratitude, including Jules, Raph, John, David, Fred, and Dazz. Thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say your names one more time. Jules, Raph, John, David, Fred, and Dazz. Thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We very much appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.